Okay, hello everyone. I'm very happy to announce Professor Graham Neubig from Carnegie Mellon University, who's also our longtime collaborator. We collaborate for the past 4 years, I think now. And he's an associate professor at the Technologies Institute of Carnegie Mellon University and chief scientist at Open Hands. His research focuses on large language models, including both fundamental advances in model capabilities and applications to tasks such as software development. His final goal is that every person in the world should be able to communicate with each other and with computers in their own language. He also contributes to making NLP research more accessible through open publishing of research papers, advanced NLP course materials, and video lectures and open source software, all of which are available on his website. And today, Graham is going to talk to us about a paper we collaborate on, Can AI Assess Scientific Research, but also Graham is going to talk to us about AI for scientific research in general. So without further ado, Graham, thanks a lot again for your time, and the floor is yours.
Yes, for sure. So thanks a lot for the invitation, and thanks to Kirill and all the others at the NEC lab for being great collaborators over all these years, as he mentioned. So this time I'd like to talk about can AI assess scientific research, and specifically. We built an automatic paper reviewer, and we tried to assess whether the automatic paper reviewer can review papers at a similar level of quality that human reviewers can across a bunch of different areas. So if you get bored during my talk and want to do something else, you can go to cmupaperreviewer.com and put in one of your own papers that you have written and see what the paper reviewer thinks about it. But the kind of background of this talk is that a lot of people are talking about automatic research nowadays, like how AI can help us within the research process. And one reason why this became very popular in the kind of like more general zeitgeist is because Andrei Karpathy did a few posts about auto research, where essentially he had a AI agent go in and try to optimize language model training so that it could get a better, loss. This is bits per byte, so the lower you get here, the better. And you can see that it made a bunch of changes. Have the total batch size, reduce the warm down. Gradually improved until at the very end it switched the random seed from 42 to 137 and got a slightly better result there, like the typical graduate student who is desperate before the paper deadline, switching up the random seed. But so uh, this is very interesting in that we've had optimization algorithms, black box optimization algorithms that can, optimize complex systems like and do hyperparameter tuning for us for a long time. But now we have a different level of intelligence there where it can kind of rely on, intuition and reasoning like a human researcher would as well. And also, you don't need to be quite as strict in defining, your search space and other things like this. And so this is very promising for machine learning research where we have a number that we want to optimize and we can let the, language model agent optimize towards that. But that's a very limited set of research, I guess. There is across the various domains of science, there are definitely places where you want to optimize a number. So to give some examples, you might have a drug that needs to work on the brain, and so you want to optimize how much it passes through the blood-brain barrier and like the amount that it passes through while still satisfying some constraints, like having the effect that you want is useful for optimizing that sort of drug. Or you might have a catalyst in chemical reactions where you want to optimize the catalytic efficiency, and you get out the greatest amount of product for the least amount of energy or something like that. Um, but still, that's not all of research, and there's a pretty broad variety of research that's more open-ended, and because of that, or where you're defining new problems, or you're finding new insights, or things like this, and so because of that, we'd like to be able to assess these as well. Um, so if we look at what the actual research process looks like, it involves deciding a problem to work on, making a hypothesis, deciding an approach, setting up experiments, optimizing the experimental result, and performing analysis, communicating the result to the world. And auto research kind of assumes that all of the other ones are done, right? Like assumes that all of the other ones are working. But in reality, much of the interestingness in research is the other parts. This is maybe, depending on your personality, this might be the most boring part or the most interesting part, but it's a very limited part. So I would like to build, AI that can help us out with research. And maybe before we start talking about this, we can talk a little bit about how we build AI for other things. And a very popular way of doing it at the moment is reinforcement learning. And so if we look at like a standard LLM, how we do reinforcement learning, we often do it with either deterministic rewards, like reinforcement learning from verified rewards. We also do it from like non-deterministic rewards. And this is often called reinforcement learning from human feedback. And some tasks where we've been very successful for doing the reinforcement learning from verifiable rewards are things like multiple choice QA or math reasoning. So, like DeepSeek R1 became very famous because it trained models for mathematical reasoning. But if we look over here, when we do reinforcement learning from human feedback, we do reward models where we've like trained a model to be very good at deciding whether a language model output is good or not. And we also have LLMs as judges, where we take like kind of a standard language model and judge various aspects of how good the output is. And both of these are super important in language model training. I would argue to say that there's probably no language model that's widely used nowadays that doesn't do RLHF, and there's also no model that doesn't do RLPR because they're all mostly trained as reasoning models and math reasoning. But you also want them to be, well aligned. You want them to be safe. You want them to give pleasant responses and stuff like that. So it's all a combination of this and this. So if we look at research, a lot of a lot of research can use these verifiable rewards, like I talked about before. But if we look at what a analog to reinforcement learning from human feedback might look like, it could be a review of a paper or a report that the automatic researcher generates. And there might be other versions of reinforcement learning from human feedback or non-deterministic rewards, but I would argue that this one is kind of natural since it's also what we do in human scientific experiments. So this paper is the one that I would like to talk about today. And basically what we did was we tested out whether we can use a agent to review scientific papers. And specifically, we asked them to review papers that were accepted at Nature or Nature-related venues that had open reviews that we could look at, so we could compare AI reviews with human reviews from these Nature papers. And I would note that when a scientist reviews for Nature or a Nature-affiliated journal, they generally are trying to do a pretty good job, I think. Like when I get requested to review for Nature, I feel a greater obligation to do a good job than another time. So I spend more time on it. So I would argue that these are probably, on average, relatively high quality human reviews. You'll also notice that Kirill is here, so thank you, Kirill, for the collaboration on this. So if we look at previous work on automatic review, um, uh, there's a bunch of different previous works. The kind of standard that people have been using up until this point is evaluating the verdict level agreement with human reviews. And so basically, they look at what the human said, they look at what the AI reviewer said, and they say if the AI reviewer gets a similar, has a similar result to the human reviewer, then it is good. Um, but this has all kinds of issues with it, which is number one, human reviewers don't necessarily agree. And so this is kind of a noisy signal. And also, there's the typical analogy of when you try to create a machine that flies, you don't create a bird, you create an airplane, right? And so actually AI reviewers could be much better than humans in some ways and catch things that humans were not able to catch for various reasons. But they might be much worse in other ways. So we'd kind of like to know on a fine grained level, what those differences are. Recently, there have been a few deployments that suggest that AI reviews can be useful and complementary to human reviews. Similar to the same point, they might do, might say things that human reviewers do not. But on the other hand, there's been a lot of indiscriminate use of AI where people just throw a paper into ChatGPT, and that gives generic feedback and inflated scores, and that can be suboptimal. And so what we don't know is we don't know whether AI criticisms are correct and significant and well evidenced. And we also don't know how much they overlap with humans, add new issues, or share failure modes. So the way we measured this is we basically took the academic papers, the human reviewers reviewed them as part of the standard review process. And so we took the itemized kind of issues that were brought up during a human review. And then we had an AI reviewer that also tried to generate itemized, issues or criticisms about the paper. And the conventional approach was essentially doing that overlap. But here, what we did instead is item by item, we tried to evaluate its correctness and significance and the sufficiency of evidence. So this is an example of one item from an AI review. So it's like actually quite extensive. But the agent is basically provided with code, a browser, and search tools implemented using the OpenHands SDK. And we tested with a number of state-of-the-art models, specifically the GPT Claude and Gemini series. And we prompted it to provide about 5 criticisms and evidence, and it generated the reviews based on the paper code and data. So the example here is the paper made a claim that the generalized eigenproblem is not made numerically robust. And so the main point of criticism was that the paper's implementation of the core generalized eigenvalue solve is not numerically hardened against overlap matrix ill conditioning. So the reported active learning MD workflow can fail unpredictably once training states become nearly linearly dependent. And so this was essentially evidenced by taking quotes from the main text, but also looking at the code that was submitted together with the paper, because a lot of Nature papers have supplementary material that includes code or data. And then it also searched the web for the SciPy documentation and quoted something from the SciPy documentation demonstrating that the way that the authors implemented this is not numerically robust. And so that was like one criticism, gathering together all the evidence. So basically, that's what we do. We give an agent powered by a language model all of these pieces of evidence and ask it to generate criticisms. The experiments here are maybe the most interesting part, in that this is the first large-scale evaluation of AI review across many different domains. And so our goal here was to get scientists across many domains of natural science, including physics, biology, chemistry, and other areas. And we asked them for each of the criticisms. Number one, is it correct? Factually correct. Number two, is it significant? And so the reason why this is important is I could criticize and say you made a typo in this part of the paper. Like you added an extra L in this word, and that's correct, but it's not significant at all. It doesn't invalidate any of the conclusions. So we also want to know about whether the criticism is significant. And also, is the criticism well evidenced? So, maybe it is correct and significant, but the evidence was not cited from the paper in any way, or it said, this is not novel, but no novel, no other like papers were cited to demonstrate that it was not novel. So that's the final part. And based on this, we have these are the statistics of the papers. So the average paper was 8,000 words. It had 5 supplementary files, 4 figures, and 296 code files, although I guess 18 was the median, so that's maybe better to look at. And we had human reviews where they had about 7 items per human review. Okay, so let's look at how AI reviewers compare numerically with human reviewers, just based on the kind of review quality criteria. So first, number one is correctness. And we divided this into the top-rated human reviewers. So on the reviewer that got the best assessment out of all of the 3 reviewers on the review panel, according to our human expert. The lowest rated human reviewer, so the one that got the worst assessment within that paper. And then GPT 5.2 and Claude Opus 4.5 and Gemini 3.0 Pro. And what we could see is that actually the language models kind of fall in between the top rated and lowest rated human reviewer with respect to whether their criticisms were correct. So this is interesting, but I would say actually to me, as somebody who's looked at a lot of AI reviews, I didn't find this super surprising because I do feel like AI can come up with correct criticisms of papers. My bigger worry is whether they were like actually significant criticisms. And so if we look at the next one, this was a surprising result to me, which is that actually we found that on average, all of the language models within some small margin of error were got a higher score for significance than the human reviewers did. And there's actually a reason for this, which I'll elaborate on the next slide. But this demonstrated that given an appropriate agentic harness, and the ability to look at code and data and all of these other things, AI agents are actually able to point out criticisms that a human expert in the field thought are significant. And also, with respect to evidence, generally AI reviewers were better at citing evidence, especially for the top 2 language models. So this is actually a very positive result for AI reviewers. It's better than I thought was going to happen. But there's a lot of caveats, and I'm going to get into these caveats in the next slides. So the next thing is we also looked at the fully positive items. And so these are the items that were judged as correct, significant, and well evidenced. And we actually had a higher percentage for the AI reviewers. But part of the reason why was because the top rated human reviewers actually pointed out a lot more things than the AI reviewers that we had. So the AI reviewers were kind of on the order of 5 to 6 items per paper, but the top-rated reviewers were 14. And part of the reason for this was, we prompted the AI reviewers to do less. But if you look at this, then if you multiply 14 by 50, and then 6 by 60%, then you can see that the top-rated human reviewer actually pointed out more, fully positive review criticisms. So the human reviewer definitely was able to point out more, have more criticisms, but that was at the cost of having a higher number of kind of like false positives, or review items that were not judged by our human expert as correct, significant, and fully evidenced. The next thing that we would like to look at is we'd like to look at whether the AI reviews could like substitute for human reviews. So like, let's say we don't need human reviewers anymore. We're just going to do AI review, and then our paper review process will be much easier. I've heard a few people say this. I don't think it's a popular opinion, and it's also not my opinion. But and the next slide will show why this is not my opinion. So essentially, what we did is we gathered multiple reviews for each paper, 3 human reviews from human reviewers, and then 3 AI reviews from AI reviewers. And we tried to determine whether the reviews were similar to each other by taking each item in each review and judging it as either being completely different, pointing out kind of the same general issue but a different criticism. So this is like, for instance, pointing out that the implementation of something is correct, but done for but pointing out that it's incorrect for a different reason. And then demonstrating different evidence. So this might be demonstrating evidence from the code versus demonstrating evidence from the paper versus being essentially exactly the same. So this is these are the results. And so when we compared human review items versus human review items, most of the review items were different. And it was very rare that we would get like exactly the same criticism on the same paper. So I don't know if this is necessarily a good thing. I think like ideally, human reviewers would some of the time point out exactly the same issue because, if there's a big issue in the paper, then ideally, they would point out the same issue because it was big and everybody cared about it. But if we compare human versus AI reviewers, it's also pretty similar. We see very little overlap. But on the other hand, for AI reviewers, only 58.9% of the issues were completely different, and we had like a lot of overlap between them, the reviews that were pointed out in the same review. And so this demonstrates like a notable lack of diversity, in the AI reviews that you get from an AI review panel. And so this is the main reason why I would be concerned with replacing, a panel of human reviewers with a panel of AI reviewers, which is, you're going to miss a lot of things because the AI reviews are very homogeneous and they don't point out important, they don't point out a lot of important things that the human reviewers manage to catch. And that also kind of goes into the next slide. And so in the next slide, we kind of categorized the various issues that we found in AI reviewers and also the strengths that we found in AI reviewers based on different categories. So the first one is the biggest thing that AI reviewers were poor at was missing field norms. And so there's a nice example of this in our paper, which you can go and take a look at, which is that AI reviewers the AI reviewer read a paper on particle physics, and it said, "You have not documented the detailed experimental parameters about this particle physics experiment." And this experiment was run at CERN, the big particle accelerator in Switzerland. And um, they, I mean, sure, this was not documented in the paper, but also it is documented in the CERN experiment logs. So anybody who has access to CERN can look up the details of the experiment. And also, you're never going to be able to reproduce the experiment anyway if you're not at CERN because you rely on this big particle accelerator that nobody else has. So basically, our particle physics collaborators said, yeah, this is totally normal in physics papers. And so we don't really need to, it's not a very valid criticism from the point of view of our field. And there were a lot of other examples of this. Other ones were over harsh, out of scope, or unrealistic. So please run this experiment again on the James Webb Space Telescope or something, which is just not possible because you can't get access to the James Webb Space Telescope. Um, there were also just errors where like the paper actually did say something and AI says it's missing. Lots of examples of redundancy, vague or verbose recommendations, trivial nitpicking, and stuff, other things like this. So we have a whole list of these. On the other hand, some of the strengths that were cited of AI reviewers were requiring statistical or methodological rigor. And so, in some fields, the standard of statistical or methodological rigor is, the reviewers might not necessarily request things that would actually make the paper a lot better. Another thing is code reading. So the AI reviewers would actually go in and read the code and be able to cite issues from the code. They were also able to catch a niche field, like issues from niche fields. And especially, they were able to catch things that were interdisciplinary papers. So it's very hard to find good reviewers for interdisciplinary papers that span multiple fields. But language models kind of have knowledge of both of the fields, and so they were able to catch some things that were not able to be caught by human reviewers. So as I mentioned, we have this available here, and you can try it out yourself if you're interested in seeing the system that we used. I personally use this before I submit my own papers now. Um, so if you want to try it, please go ahead. It's also open source if you want to download it and run it on your own if you don't want to upload your papers. But yeah, cool. So thinking about the path forward, there's some clear wins on like norms and field specific context. Uh, clear wins that could be had on improving norms and field specific context and calibrating the level of detail. Some things that are more difficult are increasing diversity in the AI reviews and improving big picture thinking to make sure they're not pointing out just, small issues, but pointing out kind of bigger issues that challenge the fundamental assumptions of the papers. And then long term, one of the things that we intentionally did in this work is we did not think about judging impact. And one of the big things that reviewers do is they basically say, I think this paper will not be impactful because X, like it's capturing too niche of a field, or, this is not good enough for nature because like nature requires a big idea, and this is kind of like a trivial extension or something like this. So we did not capture that at all intentionally. And the reason why is I don't think that this is as easy to capture just from the information in the paper, and we actually maybe need an external training signal to allow us to predict this more accurately. And so, to give one example, you could pick your favorite measure of impact, like citations or other things like that. Um, Calibrate for the typical number of citations in the field or the typical number of citations that a particular researcher would get. So if it's Yashua Bengio, he's going to get a lot more citations than the average person when he writes a paper or something. Um, and then somehow predict the impact from the paper. And we could do that, but that was out of the scope for the current work. But as I mentioned, like the biggest reason why I'm interested in this research direction in the first place is because I want to build better AI scientists. And so what I want to think about is, let's see what happens if we trained a model to optimize these reviews. So we took an AI agent that can write papers, and we just said, okay, go wild, write a whole bunch of papers that are going to be accepted to Nature. And if you did that, one of the first things I think about when I do reinforcement learning is think about reward hacking. Like, what would happen if we trained a model to optimize a reward, that reward was not robust to actually match, the sorts of things we would want to optimize. And so if we look at the first problems, we could end up learning an AI reviewer that would be a very pedantic AI reviewer that gets the tiny details very right without the big picture thinking about, whether something is impactful. And then it makes big fatal directional mistakes. So it basically selects research directions that are not very, you know, not not very well thought out overall. And then the AI reviewer is not able to tell this. And then finally, if we're not capturing impact, but just capturing correctness, that would encourage lots of small incremental work. So I would argue that our current human review system also kind of has this characteristic in that, our current human reviewers also can be very pedantic without having big picture thinking and capturing impact very well. So this might not necessarily be a new thing, but I do think we can strive to do better. And so, my next steps with respect to this are, going in and thinking of how we can train a model, and how we can further train, like a reviewer model that is able to train or, build a reviewer model that's able to do better at, all these little things here. So that's all I have for today. The talk itself was kind of short, but I'd love to have a discussion about this because I think it's a big topic. But yeah.